This video shows you how to use METIman's chest tube feature. Here's what you'll need. The 60 ml syringe with lure lock extension set from METIman's inventory kit, distilled water, silicone lubricant from METIman's inventory kit, a 28 French chest tube, the chest tube priming tube from METIman's inventory kit, a bucket for wastewater, some towels, and an IV bag with IV tubing set. METIman has 2 chest tube sites, one on each side in the 5th intercostal space. Prepare the METIman priming tube by lubricating the end to be inserted with silicone spray. Insert the lubricated METIman priming tube as far as it will go into the chest tube site you want to drain. The priming tube must be inserted until it stops to open a valve at the bottom of the site. If the valve does not open, the priming tube will not drain. The chest tube system is filled and drained from the ports located in METIman's right shoulder. There's a port for the left chest tube and a port for the right chest tube. Remove the cap from the port that corresponds to the chest tube site you're going to drain and set it aside. Fill an IV bag with clear distilled water or with distilled water mixed with food coloring and then hang it from an IV pole near the simulator. Connect the IV tubing to the chest tube port, open the IV clamp, and let fluid flow into the simulator until you can see fluid in the priming tube. If fluid does not flow out of the priming tube, push the tube deeper into the chest to make sure it is resting against the internal valve. When you can see fluid in the priming tube, remove the tube. The simulator is now ready for chest tube insertion. Prepare the chest tube for insertion by lubricating the end to be inserted with silicone lubricant. Insert the lubricated chest tube as far as it will go into the chest tube site you want to drain. The chest tube must be inserted until it stops to open a valve at the bottom of the site. If the valve does not open, the chest tube will not drain. Keep an IV bag attached for continuous drainage. You can adjust the flow rate using the IV roller clamp. If only a small volume of fluid is needed to simulate proper chest tube insertion in a field location, the internal reservoir may be filled in advance using a 60 ml syringe filled with clear distilled water or with distilled water mixed with food coloring. Prepare the METIman priming tube by lubricating the end to be inserted with silicone lubricant. Insert the lubricated METIman priming tube as far as it will go into the chest tube site you want to drain. The priming tube must be inserted until it stops to open a valve at the bottom of the site. If the valve does not open, the priming tube will not drain. Remove the cap from the port that corresponds to the chest tube site you're going to drain and set it aside. Connect the lure lock extension set to the chest tube port. Then connect the syringe to the lure lock extension set. Slowly inject all 60 ml of fluid into the port. When the chest tube is inserted properly, you'll see a small flashback of fluid in the chest tube priming tube. When you see the flashback, remove the tube. Remove the syringe and extension set from the port, and put the cap back on the port. When the chest tube feature is used on METIman pre-hospital, the simulator automatically detects chest tube insertion and creates a log entry. If you used an IV tubing set to provide continuous drainage, disconnect the tubing set from the chest tube port. Insert a lubricated chest tube or priming tube into the chest tube site if one is not already in place. Put the other end of the chest tube in a bucket to catch fluid. If colored fluid was used, fill a 60 ml syringe with clear distilled water. Connect a lure lock extension set to the chest tube port corresponding to the drain site. Then connect the syringe to the extension set. Slowly inject all 60 milliliters of water through the port. You may need to repeat this step until clear water flows out of the chest tube. Disconnect the syringe from the luer lock extension set. Fill the syringe with air. Then reconnect the syringe to the luer lock extension set. Slowly inject air through the port until only air flows out of the chest tube. Disconnect the syringe and luer lock extension set from the port. Remove the chest tube or priming tube from the drainage site and store appropriately. Don't forget to put the cap back on the chest tube port. This video showed you how to use METIman's chest tube feature. If you need more information, please consult the METIman user guide or call CAE Healthcare Customer Service at 1-866-462-7920 or at one of our international numbers if appropriate. If you found this video helpful and would like to see more, visit our website at www.caehealthcare.com.